Bigger than Capes.
Give me some Hassan.
Yeah, I was looking forward to it, and then I watched it.
Oh, dry.
Hello, welcome to Bigger Than Capes. I'm Zach, and this week I'm joined by Angela. How are you doing, Angela?
I'm doing all right, thank you. Yes.
Splendid. This week we're discussing at least one of your favourite books from 2021, Manowar, Volume 1 from Valiant.
Yeah.
Before we get into it, should we do like a Manowar recap and then like our thoughts on the Manowar we've had up until
this point? Yeah, because there's been a lot of it.
Yeah, I could be wrong, but am I right in thinking this is the 5th version of EXO, the 3rd in the current canon?
Correct, yes.
Wow, I'm impressed.
Well done.
So we had 90s.
We had the glorious 90s EXO, who has one of the worst origin stories known to man.
Which is that man who wrote all the old Valiant comics.
Jim Shooter.
Yes, Jim Shooter, thank you.
There you go.
At least to begin with. I'm not sure if he did the full run.
He tends to sort of hand it off to other people.
After an arc or two, he seems to.
Yeah, and he's like, I'm done now. Carry on, guys.
We then had the Acclaim era, which...
Yes.
Am I right in thinking the colours of his suit changes and it's Mark Waid?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. And he becomes a mercenary soldier type guy.
Yeah.
And we completely jettison whatever decent backstory we once had.
I would try and talk about who the artists were for these as well, but it was the 90s and the artists seemed to change every,
They change over... I'm sure Barry Windsor-Smith did some, because he did pretty much all of the Valiant at some point.
Seemingly, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, he did a lot of Archer and Armstrong. He did a bit. He did some Savage, so I'm sure he dipped his toe into Manowar at some point. If I have over there,
Savage?
I'm looking. Savage, yes, not Savage. Turok Dinosaur Hunter. Freaking heck! Oh, Angela, how bad are you today, guys?
I mean, I know they're the same character, but still.
Yeah, one was Gold Key, one was Valiant. I mean, I could actually check, because I have several issues of 90s EXO just about
out of shot, just in case.
Out of shot, sadly, yeah. How I live.
Don't we all? Imagine you just have all the foil covers lined up.
Yeah. It's one of the best foil covers, I will say. The first issue of EXO.
Yeah, it's strong. I'm a big fan of that, the Ninjak as well, where he's coming through the stained glass window.
Yeah, the Ninjak's probably the best of the foil covers of 90s Valiant. For those who are into collecting, I would recommend getting that one.
I mean, they're both terrible in their own special way as well, but that's part of the charm.
So 90s.
I wonder what I was talking about.
So we were going through
the versions of EXO.
Yeah.
2012, the summer of Valiant, we had the big relaunch, which was spearheaded by EXO Manowar by Robert Vendetti.
Yep. 50-issue run that guy did.
Yeah, and again changed artist quite a lot.
Several times.
It's almost like that's a theme here or something.
Yeah.
And then, so 50 issues. We then kind of have a little bit of a break before he comes back. We did have a small break,
yeah.
Then came back in the form of Matt Kint's run, which again had quite a few artists.
It did have several different artists. This is why we struggle to remember the artists, because I think some of them just did like a few issues and then...
I think for that, most people seem to do an arc. And each arc was only like 3 issues, so that's...
Yeah. And it was over 30 issues long, that run. It was a solid...
It was a good, strong run. I think a lot of the ideas All right, there's no point kind of avoiding it.
No.
It does a lot of World War Hulk and
Yes, it does.
well, World War Hulk and Planet Hulk. It does a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Kind of hero goes off into space, works as a soldier, ends up a general, then a emperor, and then he I can't remember what the next arc was called, but that's the way it could get.
That's how it went. Yeah.
And then kind of gets overthrown, comes back to Earth, quite disenchanted, and
he's really like he's lost whatever aim he had because he tried to make the universe, the galaxy, wherever he was, he tried to make it a better place, and ultimately he failed because beings are always fallible, and why should you even try?
Thanks, Angela. That's
you're welcome.
Perky start to this episode.
It's a Matt Kim book. Were you
True.
You know,
yeah,
there's going to be some sort of existential crisis involved.
Slightly more chipper than Jeff Lemire, but not really.
Yeah, that's it. He just hides it under a veneer.
So, after Kint's run, Exo finds himself back on Earth, which kind of immediately progresses into Harbinger Wars 2.
Yes.
And this is where I get really fuzzy, because I haven't reread Harbinger Wars 2, so I don't really... I know he fights Peter, right?
He does fight Peter, yes. And kind of wins? I can't remember, because Peter ends up in a cell at some point, and then the Geomancer, Tamara, the little girl, breaks him out, I think. And it all comes crashing down. And Harbinger Wars 2 narratively is a mess.
I know that Tamara the Geomancer mattered.
Yeah, she did.
And Livewire mattered to begin with.
Livewire mattered to begin with, and then we sort of abandoned Amanda for other things. And oh, by the way, she was completely, totally wrong, guys. She didn't have a point. She was completely wrong. She was kind of... Basically, what they did to Amanda was what they did to Captain Marvel in Civil War 2.
Yeah, completely threw her under the bus after an initially interesting premise.
Yeah, that's the one.
She turned Bloodshot into a winged Bloodshot, and he...
Yes.
Concept cool, execution bizarre. Was this Matt Kint? Did Matt Kint write Harbinger Wars 2?
I can't remember who actually was involved in Harbinger Wars 2 because it was so bad. I just felt terrible for everyone involved.
It was meant to be Eric Heiserer and
it was.
Patricia Martin and...
Yeah, because they'd come off Secret Weapons.
What's he called? What's the artist called? Raoul Allen?
Yes, could be.
It was meant to be continued by them, and they ended up doing the precursor issue, and then yeah, they were seemingly... Yes, it was Matt Kint. Yeah. And then Matt Kint had to do the...
Yeah, and then I think didn't Elliot? No, Elliot Rahal didn't come onto that to fix it. Normally, they bring him on to fix things that don't work.
It does feel like Valiant have a kind of agreed upon system that if something falls apart, Elliot Rahal will...
He'll come and save us all.
It for some reason.
Fix it, yeah. It was Raoul Allen. You were right. Yes, was the art.
Right,
yeah, because it was meant to be a direct follow-up to Secret Weapons. They were going to be like the basis for it, and the first couple of issues it kind of fitted in with that and the Harbinger Renegades, and then we kind of abandoned that for
reasons.
Yeah, other things.
The PSYOP side kind of falls away in the general chaos of it all.
And Exo has a fight with Peter, and then at the very end he ends up fixing satellites with Amanda because...
And we've got one of my favourite bits of continuity, that we've got this ring of debris from the Vine invasion.
Yes, which makes... It's one of the few good things in Harbinger Wars 2, that we have a little bit of continuity.
Yes. There's so much felt like it was leading into Harbinger Wars 2, and then so little was.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it was originally going to be a 4-part 48-page issue job, and then it changed to a 6-part 32-page issue job. So
yes. And my confusion then is, this is something I want to hammer out kind of before we get into the actual volume.
Yeah.
Is Exo Manowar's timeline.
Oh, it's a bit wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey.
And it just, because that 50-issue Vendetti run is like years, like 3 years long.
Yeah, yeah. And there
longer,
is a passage,
maybe?
Yeah, longer than that. And there is a distinct passage of time with it as well.
Yes. Then, however, we're told he's disappeared for a while and had kids that have lived and died.
Yeah.
In a kind of Dr. Manhattan situation where the exposure to Shinhara has led to one of them, I want to say, getting leukemia and dying.
Basically they get cancer. Like, he can't be around his family because like you say, the Shinhara armor causes death. So he's really sad. And then his ex ends up getting together with another guy. Yes,
and then while he's exiles himself and then goes off into space and
he meets a nice alien lady, though. He does have a nice
gets himself a nice alien girlfriend, and then everything we've mentioned before with Soldier, General, Emperor turns against Bales.
Abandons all those people that he supposedly cared about in space.
Yes. And then this, I can't remember what the dialogue is, but this volume, so the 2021 volume we're going to talk about, acknowledges that there's been another time gap.
Yes. But we don't know what he's been doing in that time gap at all.
Which, on the one hand, kind of, there has realistically been a time gap because that's how Valiant works. They rest characters, so there is a period in between storylines more often than not. But in this case, kind of helps in the shifting of the character from one phase to another.
Yeah.
I think there is only one moment in this that suggests that anyone knows about what happened in Kint's run.
There's not a lot of references to previous runs.
I don't know if it's a knowing reference or not, but Troy does say something about like reformatting a country and then leaving everyone to fend for themselves. Which basically, either knowingly or not, reference from the character perspective, references what's happened in
Kint's
the past.
Yeah.
But a lot of this is fairly standalone from what we've seen, I think.
It feels a little bit soft reboot.
Yes, and even things like the opening scene, we see a kind of rogue vine attack.
Yeah.
Which feels like a throwback to like the second or third arc of Vendetti's run.
It feels really retro in that sense. It does feel a bit like we're not really gonna tackle. We're kind of. It feels more like it's a follow up to those early arcs of Vendetti's run, rather than we've also had all this happen. Because this Arik as a character cleaves closer to Vendetti's Arik than Kint's Arik.
Yeah, and that's probably another thing in canon we need to kind of talk about before we talk about the book, which we will definitely do at some point.
We will. Hang on in there, guys.
The relationship between Arik and Shinhara kind of is different again here and becomes different in the first issue, because we've kind of seen him discover this armor in Vendetti's run, not really understand it, then kind of learn to work together, then turn against it at the start of Kint's run and kind of have a fear of it almost and not really work together. Throughout Kint's run, we kind of see him accept Shanhara again and piece by piece gets the armor back before returning to Earth, and they kind of have a kind of weird dynamic.
Yeah, I don't enjoy it. I mean, there is, like Kint's run, I like that you have to have them rebuild the relationship because, like you say, Eric's kind of a bit scared and also doesn't want to use the armor and all the rest of it, and it's nice to see that progress. It's one I didn't like the concept, but I liked the execution. And then in Harbinger Wars, it's kind of slightly, it's still not, it's different again. It's not quite there.
So I feel like this needed to kind of soft reboot things like that because it's kind of been an awkward transitional period where we haven't really had EXO where Arik and Shinhara work together to be the superhero there. We haven't really had a lot of EXO as a superhero since Vendetti's run.
No, we haven't, because he was almost, at times it was almost like a cross between sort of like Superman and Thor almost, in that he was like this superhero-y type messiah figure almost in some respects, but also he was leading his people kind of like Thor. When people sort of say he's a cross between Iron Man and Thor, I always get it's like you're just saying Iron Man because he wears a suit, guys, but there's definite parallels with Thor in terms of, because they have their own little community and you get that impression it's like New Asgard kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely that kind of vibe. And that the kind of New Asgard, New Visigoth type thing isn't really touched upon at all in here.
No, he's completely cut off from his people and society and all of that. And you're like, what happened to them? Or has he just decided never go back? Is that the theory? Because he built his own community in this one, but it feels more like, I don't know, moving to the big, almost a bit Superman in that, you move to the big city and you build your own new support network around you.
And I kind of get it, because I think having Arik off with the Visigoths in Nebraska, I want to say.
Yeah, it was one of those states.
Always felt like taking a hero who's meant to be the face of Valiant, or more often than not is, and separating him out from the people that it's very rare that he was legitimately just defending his own people. He was dealing with worldwide threats throughout all previous kind of arcs. So I guess that separation, and that's basically something that's almost a theme throughout this book. So maybe we should just talk about the book.
We should probably mention, because we've been throwing all kinds of words around like Arik and Visigoths and stuff. Just a very brief potted character history in there.
We should have started with that.
We should have started with that, but retroactively...
What's 20 minutes between friends?
Listen to this and then go back and then it'll all make sense. So Arik is a Visigoth. For those of you who are unfamiliar with history, the Visigoths were one of the tribes that, were around in Europe during the fall of the Roman Empire. So he was a Visigoth. In the 90s run, his parents are actually brutally murdered by Roman soldiers in the 5th century, as happens. It's quite, his mother gets raped and beheaded. It's so 90s origin. But anyway, he's there. He's happily, helping to lead the tribe in the 5th century when he is abducted by some aliens known as the Vine, who crop up quite a lot in Valiant. or they used to.
They did for a while. Yeah.
They did for a while. And basically, he's like a slave prisoner aboard a spaceship where there are many other people who've been enslaved by the Vine. Long story short, he steals their sacred armor, Shanhara, the Exo Manowar armor that bonds to him, and then he goes on and defeats the Vine and then comes back to Earth and stuff happens. He has adventures, as people do. That's the basic potted history. And then a load of stuff happens, and now we find ourselves here at this book. There you go.
I can't really argue with that.
Hey, that means I was nearly factually correct.
I think you were entirely factually correct. Well, maybe not entirely. I don't want anyone to hold that
also,
against us.
Time passes. I should mention that he does end up kind of in the modern day because the Vine are aliens and space and stuff. So...
Yes. I don't know what I wanted to say then. So, this volume, all of this run, even, maybe?
Yeah.
It is written by Dennis Hopeless, or Dennis Hopeless Hallum, as he seems to also be credited on some books. It seems to depend now. The artist is Emilio Laiso.
Yep.
Is Ruth Redmond, and the letterer is Hassan Otsmane-Elhaou.
Yeah. One of my favourite.
And the covers are by Christian Ward, so
covers are pretty nice, actually.
A pretty killer lineup of creators, to be fair. Quite a big Dennis Hopeless fan, and I know you're a big Hassan fan.
I am.
And
I like Ruth Redmond's colouring as well.
That's fair. I think this might be my first Emilio Laiso book.
I'm not familiar with other work. But
don't hold me to that. I'm often wrong with these things. I'm normally like, it's my first thing by whoever.
Yeah.
I think it's a really good creative team. And kind of gives EXO a new look quite comfortably.
Yeah.
It feels like this, particularly the opening pages, are recognizable against stuff like the Vendetti run in particular.
Yeah.
However, has a clear aesthetic. We see at one point a redesign of the EXO armor, which seems to be like a running thing at this point in kind of all runs.
Yes.
We just seem to constantly get little tweaks. Obviously, Vendetti's run was updating the armor from the 90s and from Acclaim, and so that's a pretty big jump, I guess. And we also see a kind of change through the Matt Kint run where we kind of see Shanhara as like a modular type thing.
Yeah.
So we see the armor broken down into its individual sections.
Yeah. Some of which, didn't he bury some of it in a hole, as I recall? There was some thing where he'd buried some of Shanhara somewhere, and
possibly he wraps it up into the ball and just keeps the ring so he can contact it.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of become a thing, and don't get me wrong, it happens in a lot of superhero books that there's a bit of a soft redesign of the look. But I think it works here, and I think this is recognizable compared to other EXO runs, but different enough. I think there's a greater focus on seeing Arik outside of the armor but on Earth, if that makes sense.
In his casual hoodie.
Casual hoodie and his sweatpants.
Yeah.
A strong look for a man, I'm sure we'll all agree.
And his man bun. Let us not forget the man bun.
Which I guess makes sense. It kind of... this is something I was going to touch on, so I may as well touch upon it now. I think one of the things that's done throughout this volume is kind of bringing EXO into the modern world. And I think there's been this security through the Visigoth settlement in potentially Nebraska. And having him off world has kind of given the comfort that he doesn't have to fit into the modern world or his surroundings. Here it feels like there is an effort made to place him in Harlem, right? They're in
Harlem. Yeah.
There's an effort made to place him in like a real world location and in modern day clothing with his little man bun, which is in keeping with bringing him into the now. There's also a theme throughout where we see him, don't want to say befriended, but working alongside a character called Troy Whitaker, who...
Yes.
He's Tony Stark.
He is very much, he's I was going to say, there is one character that clearly he's inspired by, and that's Tony Stark.
Which is definitely intentional, and I feel like it is almost placed there to address the comparison to Iron Man.
Yeah.
To be like, no, this is what Tony Stark is like. See how different he is from Arik right now.
Yeah.
Which works, I think.
It does work.
Putting this tech mogul billionaire next to Arik, who's helping Arik, but... Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Helping in inverted commas.
Yeah.
But the subplot that Troy is trying to bring Arik kind of into the public eye as not just this super-powered threat, but as a character that, you know, he wants to help. He's a good guy. He's
a person who just wants to do the right thing.
Pretty much, yeah. It's almost like he might say something along those.
Yeah. I'm not saying that's a direct quote.
But I feel like that is an effort within this book to bring that to the character of EXO. I feel like one of the biggest problems Valiant suffers from is people look at EXO and say, well, he's like Iron Man crossed with Thor. They look at Bloodshot and say he's like the Punisher crossed with Wolverine. And
I mean, I think that's why Faith is so popular, because she is very much in the modern world, doing modern things, being modern relatable.
Yes.
Whereas, like you say, all the other ones, you're just inviting comparisons with other heroes. Like Ninjak is... And cross with James Bond, maybe.
Yeah, a little bit of both. And I think it's a good effort to kind of address that head on. I think everyone previously has tried to, and I'm not knocking it, but people have tried to just ignore that and be like, no, the character stands up in his own right. And he does. EXO, Arik, whatever you want to call him, works as a character, but to the average person seeing him on a cover, he looks like Thor in an Iron Man suit. There's no escaping that reality. So it's, I think, to kind of use the narrative to address that and to, in canon, try and make him more mainstream kind of is a reflection of the story being told and the reality. I'm not sure what I'm reflecting anymore, but I stand by what I'm trying to say.
It made sense. I think it is, because this is, like I say, he's still Arik in that he still comes from the 5th century and he's still bonded to a sentient suit of alien armor, and doesn't understand such things as basketball particularly. Bless him. But it is more that he's at least trying to fit into the world. Like, you know, he's dressing like a modern person and he's hanging about and, you know, attempting to play basketball. And it's kind of, it is giving a more human face, because even though we've seen him have it's weird, because like in Kint's run, that's the whole point, is human fallibility and all that. But that's done in a way that Exo becomes less, I don't know, not relatable is the word, but I don't want to even go likable particularly, but he sort of is more of a mythology, whereas this guy is a guy that, yeah, you know, Arik could be walking down the street and then putting on a suit of armor and flying off, having ruined a basketball game.
Yeah.
It makes him more, in a way, it makes him more interesting to have that attempt to put him into the modern world and actually have him try and live within the modern world, because I don't think that, like in Vendetti's run, he was kind of hanging about with the Visigoths and they weren't really making much attempt to integrate, like we have our own little settlement. Whereas here it is more like Arik's aware that he needs to make an effort, and that's why, you know, he agrees that Troy can help him, because he wants to fit into a more modern aesthetic and be seen as more than just that guy in a suit of armor.
Yeah, pretty much nails it, I think.
Yeah.
And I think we're almost in a position now where, so this runner's finished now.
Yeah,
right?
it has. Yeah, 9 issues. I feel like it could have done more. It's certainly like, it's like there's a definite arc. Don't get me wrong. It's a good arc. I am disappointed that we're not getting more now.
I think this has been a frequent thing with Valiant in the last couple of years, is that whilst previously nothing outstayed its welcome, I think none of the current series approach like the point where I feel like I've had enough. The last series that I remember reading and thinking like, hey, this has got to the point where it needs to get to, was like Quantum and Woody, where it was like 12 issues, and maybe not even 12 issues, I'm not sure. But
I think it was, yeah. It was like a few arcs, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was like 2, maybe 3 arcs, and it felt conclusive and felt like they'd done what the creative teams had set out to do. With current things, I feel like we've got quite a lot of miniseries that kind of end perhaps sooner than they need to.
Yeah.
And I've only read half of this so far, so I've got volume 2 to read, which comes out in a couple of weeks, I think.
At time of recording.
Yeah, true. But who knows? But it would be nice to feel like this run serves the purpose it has. One of the thoughts for me reading this is, as we've said, this deals with bringing Arik into the modern world. It would be nice to see that whoever the next run is by, if they can try and balance this Arik, which is a version of Arik I don't think we've seen before. I think this feels fresher and more down to earth than we normally get. A kind of air of superiority from Arik. It makes him incredibly unlikable.
There's that phrase I like to use. Arik is a dick.
Yes, he really is, though. It seems harsh, but
he is.
He's not a great guy, and this brings him down from that a lot, which is nice. My kind of hope for the next arc, next series, next team to take over would be to try and find a way to balance this version of Arik with the kind of Kintz Vendetti history, so we can have something that comes good on the, you know, man who ruled a planet and has had all the trials and tribulations, but still has a modern day supporting cast, and
who has befriended a local child and his family, and, you know, is quite willing to, you know, not, you know, clean up the neighborhood necessarily, but that kind of
am I right in thinking he's Desmond Morris?
Desmond, yes. Des to his friends.
I don't know if his mum has a first name.
Tragically, Yeah, I think Ms. Morris, or Mom, is how she's referred to through most of this.
Which, as I've mentioned in previous book reviews, is something that annoys me.
Yeah, it is. I think that's probably the weakest part of this, is that we don't do enough with her. Although she does come good in later issues. Spoilers, but she's very important in the finale.
That's good to know. I do like her as a character, even though we don't see a lot of her. I mean, it's the same with Des. We don't really see a lot of him, but what we do see...
he's going to become important later on. Stick with it on that one. I can say he's going to be really, really vital later on in the second part.
That's good to know. I think it is nice to have a modern supporting cast for Eric. I think Des, Ms. Morris, and Troy are all good for bringing him forward. I think having a modern day villain in, I'm going to murder this, but Vlad Yakyov, the kind of Ukrainian...
Is he Russian and he's getting involved in the Ukrainian civil war, which is a thing that's occurring in this... In real life, we'd not had that. But in this universe, there is a Ukrainian civil war and he is sowing discontent and...
Yeah, doing, horrible things to try and take over the Ukraine.
Yeah, basically.
He does go quite quickly from this problematic terrorist in the Ukraine to almost Lex Luthor-esque proportions, raining down televisions with him talking on. So he's like cutting between different TV screens and then nipping over to Harlem to cause havoc with a bunch of like construction equipment he's modded out to, I don't know, have claws and stuff.
As you do.
Yeah, I mean...
And there's that,
standard stuff, innit?
There's that great bit where Eric's in the middle of an explosion, he's just yelling, Yakyov! Like, come!
And I think this is one of the things that's so weird about this book, is there's definitely a sense of humour to this volume of Exo that we don't see in previous volumes.
Yeah.
And yet, there are horrible things happening. When Yakyov, destroys the full army and a massive amount of a city, it's legitimately horrifying to have. It's a terrible moment and even though Eric's response is ludicrous, of just screaming Yakyov and whilst engulfed in flames, while Shanhara's like, we're on fire.
Yeah, like we gotta go. We gotta go, dude. Yeah.
I think it feels like there are stakes in this. It feels like the Ukraine is in danger. It feels like twice we see Eric fight a kind of nanite swarm.
Yeah.
Once in a forest fire in California, and then once in the middle of the ocean. And both times it does feel like Eric's in over his head, and it feels like
there are stakes.
Yes, which is hard to do when you've got a character who is crazy overpowered, especially when Shanhara constantly points out that she is, this most advanced weapon on Earth, the most advanced technology, and to then have a situation where it doesn't feel like it's a foregone conclusion that they're going to win the fight is something that's hard to do. It's something that I think people struggle with in stuff like Superman or Captain America or any superhero that were kind of presented as being unstoppable. It then becomes challenging to define that they can still be taken down. And we also have a good scene in this where Yakiov's army are convinced they've taken down Exo in 3 different areas, but they're just robots that have been painted to look like him. And they don't look like him that much.
No.
That was another thing, actually. Troy's robot minions.
Yeah.
And I don't know the character's name. I've got it down to either being Darkheart or Tyler Steele.
Yeah.
From VR Troopers.
Yeah.
Do you know who I mean?
I know who you mean, yeah.
Is immediately what I thought that those robots looked like, with the big, like, dome heads and the little red details. And I don't remember much about VR Troopers. I just know I have the action figure somewhere. Which I think made the Googling especially hard.
Yeah, they don't look particularly original in design, but they work really well, especially when you paint them and they look nothing like Exo. I enjoyed that. But yeah, that's what I like about this as well, is that, like, Kint's run is super serious. Like, you would have to dig very hard to find even the semblance of something slightly humorous. Whereas this really balances the mortal peril, because you do at some points think, okay, Aric's really going to lose this, and he's going to lose it hard. Mixed in with, you know, sort of really nice sort of humour and banter. And I do love AI banter. And Shenhara's got some really great lines.
I feel like this is the first time Shenhara has felt like a character in her own right.
Yeah, which I think has always been missing from Exo. I mean, Kint nearly manages it in his run, but I think he's too focused on Aric's Soldier, General, Emperor, Fall from Grace arc that he does kind of neglect her. But here she is a character in her own right, and she feels like a person, and it does feel like they've been together a while, and it's sort of like an old married couple kind of dynamic.
Yeah, there's a lot of kind of bickering and back and forth dialogue.
Shenhara's
normally right.
Yeah, Shenhara, what the hell is this thing? It appears to be a robot. I know it's a robot. It's just like...
Is that the same scene as, like, he calls her a robot and she's like, you know I'm not a robot.
Yeah, you're a robot. You know I'm not a robot, Aric. Everything's a robot these days. It's good stuff.
Which I think is a strength of Dennis Hopeless's writing, I think. We see throughout his Spider-Woman that he was very good at balancing the comedy with the action, with the emotion, with just about everything else. And I think that's something that Valiant doesn't always get. I think they have their comedy series and they have their action series, and never the two shall meet. And
that's it. Yeah. Where is my Archer and Armstrong Ninjak crossover? Where?
You're asking a lot now.
I am.
But I think it works when we get it. I think when, don't get me wrong, we got the Bloodshot Archer and Armstrong crossover. That happened.
That's true. That did happen.
And we frequently see Eternal Warrior with Archer and Armstrong. And I think things like that allow for the comedy and the action to come together. I think it's the introducing comedy into something serious that makes it feel more rounded as a book, which is one of the strengths here.
Definitely. It just feels like it's nailed all the different things that it needs to do. It's got the action and the peril and the emotion and the humour, and it's actually hitting those points. Not all the time, there are some misses, but the majority of the time it's hitting everything it needs to do.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I think there's Desmond and Yakiov's kind of exchanges in the last issue of this volume, I'm not sure are completely hitting the mark.
They were a little bit awkward, not gonna lie.
But I'm kind of willing to let that go in spite of the rest of the dialogue kind of hitting the mark.
Yeah.
But I think, the action, the comedy, the kind of sci-fi elements, that's essentially the variety of villains. So we've got kind of the recurring Vlad Yakiov and the recurring Nanite Swarm.
Yeah.
I think both work as kind of opposing sides of the threats. Opposing sides of the threats to Arik. I think we see something grounded and of Earth with Vlad that obviously Arik isn't used to. He's used to smashing his problems. And then we see the Nanite Swarm, which is kind of more in keeping with what
we're used to seeing him fight,
But he's still in over his head with both of them, which...
Yeah. And it's interesting because obviously he's dealt with in the past, the distant past, when he was, hanging around Dacia or Dacia, however you wish to pronounce the name of Romania and its youth. He's dealt with that before, like with the Romans, and you feel like sometimes he is drawing a parallel between Yakiov and Romans and things. But he's never actually dealt with a guy quite like this who's got an army and, construction, mad, crazy tanks. And just...
Yeah.
And he doesn't quite know how... He knows he's a murderous dictator and I must take him down, but he's kind of at a loss of quite how to do that. But then with the nanites, he's like, I'll just, punch it. And it's like, that's not working. Okay. But that's worked in the past with things, if I punch them. Bless him. But yeah, it's nice, like you say, it's nice to see two different sort of threats that he has to deal with. And ultimately, he's not really sure how to deal with each one of them, even though, in theory, he has the experience to do it. But I guess it's a bit different fighting a war on an alien planet when you're the Emperor compared to flying around Harlem.
I mean, it's an argument, I guess,
slightly
to be made. But I do think all those ideas really complement each other, and I feel like this could have been the start of a pretty long EXO run.
Yeah, I am disappointed we only got... Because 9 issues as well seems an odd number.
Yeah, you would expect 10 or 12 or... I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure how many... Is this 4 issues, this volume?
4 issues, I'm pretty sure it's... Yeah.
Yeah, 1 to 4.
1 to 4, yeah.
So this is standard Valiant length, to be fair.
Yeah, and it works as Valiant length, but it does feel like we could have had more. I mean, don't get me wrong, the 9 issue, this tells its story very well in the 4 issues, like Valiant of old, which is nice to see when 4 issues was standard practice. And the other 5 issues tell the arc really well, and it feels like it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it nicely slots onto the end of this. But at the same time, I do feel like there was potential then to do another arc after that and go a bit further. I wouldn't have objected to 12 issues. That would have been kind of nice.
Yeah, I think it would have been nice to get that kind of concluded feel of like a 10, 12 issue run.
Yeah.
It's weird, I suppose, because we don't always know what we're going to get with Valiant.
No, and there have been a lot of disappointments recently where books have not had a very long run at all before they've just disappeared. Ninjak, which started really strong, and then we got into the meat of an arc, and then we changed artists partway through an issue, which was just bizarre.
I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah, and then the Shadow Man, which is coming back with the Deadside War and all that, but at the same time, doesn't feel like it had enough momentum to build into that. Whereas this feels like it's got momentum to go a bit further than how long it has. I mean, I suppose it's nice to, you know, always leave them wanting more, as that person quoted that one time. But I would have...
Nicely said, Angela.
Yeah. So articulate. But yeah, I would have... I'm really glad we've got this, because this is my favourite version of Arik, I think, because Arik is mostly a dick. And much as I enjoyed Vendetta's run, I enjoyed Kint's run, but less so. It's just nice to have an Arik who I can actually care about and root for, as opposed to, you know, just thinking, oh God, what's he done now? What's he doing now? Just don't, Arik. And it's nice to have Shanhara as her own character, and have that relationship, because that's not been done before. It does feel like fresh, and it feels really newbie friendly as well. I think, you know, we have touched upon the fact that it doesn't really draw on the earlier continuity of the previous runs, which is a drawback on the one hand, but on the other, I think it means that people can come into this without having had to read, you know, like 100 previous issues of something. They can come in fresh, and you've basically got quite a fun book, and then you too can be disappointed when it ends after only 9 issues, just as you're getting into it. But I think it's the most successful of the Valiant books of the last couple of years, in that A, it's finished.
True.
I suppose. And B, it does everything that I want it to do, and I actually care about Arik. And what a miracle that is.
I think that is a great strength of this. One of our things has always been that we're big into Bloodshot, we're big into Archer and Armstrong, Quantum and Woody, Eternal Warrior, Psyots. I think Arik has always been one of the ones that I've struggled with. Don't get me wrong. Clearly, we've both read everything he's been in, but I think EXO can often, to a lesser extent, suffer from that Superman thing of being quite standoffish and overpowered, and not being the most engaging of characters. So it's nice. I think there's more of a human element here, which kind of endears Arik to us more. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, those were good words. Good words. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to Volume 2. I know you've already read it.
I've read it before. Well, I read it in singles. It was not a Volume 2 when I read it, but I read it in singles and thought it was really, really good.
It's good to know. I am looking forward to it, and I would like to see more from Dennis Hopeless and Emilio Laiso at Valiant. I think that's it's hard to know what's going on at the moment. Cullen Bunn seems to be the only recurring name on the Valiant roster.
Yeah, he does.
I think we see artists revisited more frequently, but people who I quite heavily associated with Valiant a few years ago, like Raoul Allen, who we've mentioned earlier, Patricia Martin, Luis LaRosa, seem to have gone elsewhere the last few years, and I get, you know, that's the way comics work, and it's always good to see new artists, but it feels like there's been a big turnover in creative teams. There was a good period, I want to say there was a good 4 or 5 year period at Valiant where we saw recurring creators. Jeff Lemire, Fred Van Lente, Josh Dysart, Matt Kint, who kept coming up, working on different books. Elliot Rahal as well, obviously, as we mentioned earlier.
Bringing to fix all the things.
Yeah, the problem solver. Kept coming up, working on different books, but it kind of gave everything a coherent feel. I would be quite into if the next stage of that is Cullen Bunn, Dennis Hopeless.
Yeah.
Others, by all means.
Other creators are available.
I know Mags Visaggio worked on Dr. Mirage. I think it would be great to see her bring more to Valiant. I think it would just be nice to have recurring creators so you kind of know that it's people who are invested in the universe again, which is how it always used to feel for Valiant.
Yeah, and hasn't the last few years. It's felt like we'll just hire anyone who's available.
And I'll admit that might just be a perception thing. There's every chance that Jeff Lemire and Matt Kinn it was all just work, but they seemed to do better work at Valiant when they had more freedom than they did in Marvel or DC, where it's a stricter kind of plan to adhere to.
It felt like even though you had a coherent universe, each creator was able to have their own creative voice within that universe.
Yeah.
And it does feel like this version of EXO could be that also. It feels like that this feels like Dennis Hopeless has done the way he wants to write it. It feels like the artists had, because it's not, I've spoken in the past about Valiant house style, and a lot of Valiant books do have, certainly in the 2012 onward period, they did have a certain house style, whereas now it feels like artists can kind of go their own way a bit. It's not as out of the sort of lines that, say, the Ninjak run was, but it still feels quite fresh. It doesn't feel like it's just following a house style. It feels like there has been the opportunity for the art to just, have a play about and see what works and do its own kind of thing. But it still feels like a Valiant book, which is a tricky little thing to balance. But it is nice to see them allowing that to happen as well.
I very much agree.
Yay.
I feel like that might be most of what we had to say about this.
I would agree, yeah.
But yeah, I would be game for more Dennis Hopeless and Emilio Laiso. Looking forward to seeing where EXO goes after this run. I hope we're not going to, I hope something will be taken for this run going forward. Yes, I hope it isn't another reboot. I hope whoever the next creative team are take what they've got here and run with it. And like I say, if they can fold in the Kint stuff and fold in the Vendetti stuff, I think that could be awesome. If they decide to just take this and run forth, could also be really good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's us on EXO Manowar.
Yeah. Good book.
Good book. I liked it a lot.
Yeah.
Good call, Angela.
Thank you.
So we have been Angela and Zach, collectively bigger than capes.
Yes.
And remember that comics.
Here we go.
Are
bigger than capes.